And joining us right now, Don, is Lee Lowenfish, baseball historian, author of a book called Branch Rickey. Of course, you and I have talked about Branch Rickey on the show before. We'll get some more insight today. And Lee Lowenfish joins us from New York today via telephone. Lee, thanks for being with us. Doug Miles and Don Henderson, how are you?
I'm fine. Pleasure to be with you in this incredibly balmy late fall. I was up in New England with my nephew, and it was about 60 degrees around Boston, and it's about 65 in New York. It's amazing, but it's that just gets us ready for the baseball season.
That's right.
I'm one of those people that's counting the days. I think we're down to about 75 before the camps open. Huh?
Yeah, that's the weather's just about right there. I came back from Florida I'm on the Jersey Shore right now, and as you said, 72 degrees in Central Park today was a new record over there, and it's really been almost spring training weather in the Northeast for the last couple of days, and it's going to end tomorrow, unfortunately.
Well, we'll just count the days then. And how about baseball having the sanest labor relations? Who would have thought that 15 years ago?
Oh boy, how about that, huh? Well, let me ask you this as an outset. I haven't had a chance to read your book. Obviously, Doug told me a little bit about it, but Branch Rickey is one of my favorite people. And what got you interested in doing a Branch Rickey, and how long did it take you to do it?
Well, it took me about 10 years, and I had gotten sour about baseball over the strikes and the lockouts, even though my first book was The Imperfect Diamond. That was a very pro-baseball union group, but I saw how it became excessive, and they shut the whole industry down in 94, as we all remember. And yet, Rickey, I got to meet his family. I went out to Ohio Wesleyan, where he went, and which he always said made him the man he was, because he was a very poor guy growing up in southern Ohio in Scioto County.
Right.
But he was the diamond in the rough, and of course he made his mark to New Yorkers by bringing up Jackie Robinson and building that whole farm system. But the more I studied him, because I'm a historian by training, Don and Doug, the more I realized that this is a Midwestern guy who built the farm system. And then later, the part that I included in the last section of my book, he tried to lead the third league, the Continental League, which is all but forgotten now. And yet every city that he wanted in that league has baseball now. So he was ahead of his time, or too early with that, but he was right on time with both the farm system and the signing of Jackie Robinson and the other black players. So I felt the whole story needed to be told, and that's why I did it.
Well, the interesting thing to me with Branch Rickey was, as you indicated, coming up with that Midwestern Ohio background and not a lot of money. The money was the thing that killed him all the way along the line. Even in the case of O'Malley, when he was pushed out of the Brooklyn Dodger organization, which he built from almost nothing, was because he didn't have the money. I mean, it was as simple as that. They had a conflict of interest, and Mr. Rickey never really had the kind of money that you would think he would have had, having built, the Cardinal franchise and the Dodger franchise and the Pirate franchise and all the rest.
And a lot of people forget that when we were watching the World Series and the Cardinals doing that almost miraculous run, that uniform was something that Branch Rickey discovered early in his tenure in St. Louis. He saw a napkin with Cardinals on a bat, and he said to his people in the office, "Hey, we have to put this on the uniform." And I think all of us, whether we're Cardinal fans or not, love that uniform. It's just beautiful, as well as represents the team now that's won second many World Series next to the Yankees. And it all started under his reign there in the early 1920s.
I was going to say, yeah, with the spring training, the minor league teams or the farm leagues that Branch Rickey pretty much invented. I guess the Cardinals had at one time 4 or 5 different levels of of farm teams where they could, I guess part of the reason was it was cheaper to grow your own talent than either trading for players or buying players. I mean, that was out of necessity, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And he did overdo it. I mean, they had 732 players at one time. And when he came to the Dodgers, by the time he left the Dodgers in 1950, they had over 400. So but the thing is that when you played with the Dodgers, you knew how to play the game. And I heard Carl Erskine speak about that, about how you learned about pitching, you learned about running, you learned about competition in that organization. And once Rickey faded from the scene, no one in the game was as thorough in the development of players. Now, free agency comes along in the 70s, and then it was possible to, buy players. But the Rickey principle is still about, you need players who can run and throw and know how to win. I think that's an eternal verity, and it's true today, even though money plays a much greater role than it did in the early days of the game.
And I don't think anyone has developed the concept or followed the concept that he had at Dodgertown of Vero Beach when he had the Dodger school. Everybody had to go through the school. I mean, he was such a technician when Duke Snider, for instance, came up with the Dodgers, very much of a free-swinging outfielder. And that was when he built the string box. And Duke Snider had to stand in there for hours after hours and look at pitches and look at pitches and look at pitches until he could distinguish strikes and balls. And
that's right. He spent the whole spring training.
That's right.
They did not allow him to swing the bat.
That's right.
Can you imagine what an agent would do nowadays if the word came down that was going to happen?
And the other thing that many people don't realize about Branch Rickey, and I'm sure that you have it in your book as well, religion played a very, very big part in his being brought up in the Midwest. But also, he never attended a game on Sunday. He didn't go. That was his culture, not to participate in Sunday baseball. Although he had Sunday baseball, but he didn't go himself.
Right. And his name, I'm glad you raised the point, because his name was Wesley Branch Rickey. And he was, a lot of kids were named Wesley because where he grew up was a big Methodist area in southern Ohio. But his parents were very religious, and they taught him the Wesley rule about being good and serving people as much as you can. And he certainly applied it to his baseball work. And ideally, if he found a player who could be off the field as abstinent as he was, all the better. And of course, in the world of baseball, you had people like Dizzy Dean and Leo DeRocher who were part of his gas house gang, and they were hardly quiet off the field. And yet, he tried to merge them all into a team, and that's why I think it's such a great story.
Absolutely. Obviously one of his boasts, which a lot of youngsters today won't know much about, but when the Dodgers were training in Cuba and Leo DeRocher got in all that trouble, was suspended for a year, that certainly didn't follow the culture of Branch Rickey, but at the same time, he realized that Leo DeRocher was a heck of a baseball guy, and he wanted to stay with the organization.
Right, and I consider the way DeRocher stopped whatever petition might have started against Robinson was his finest hour. I mean, it's a great story about their training in Panama, and DeRocher finds out that some of the Southern players want to keep Robinson from coming up to the Dodgers, and he says, if you have a petition, you know where you can put it, boys. And, but let's face it, he's just the first, and and there are a lot more coming, and you better be ready to compete. But green is the important thing, not black. And believe me, this player is going to put green in your pocket and mine, and that way he squashed whatever rebellion had started.
Well, also the fact that it made one of his greatest trades, Breacher Rowe and Dixie Walker and Billy Cox. That trade with Pittsburgh was one of his greatest
Dixie Walker was called the People's Choice in Brooklyn, or the People's Choice. You know, he used to beat the Giants, and he would speak at every community meeting that he was asked to, and which is something that Rickey loved in his players. He wasn't traded because of his racial attitudes. In fact, at the end of the year of '47, when Robinson was Rookie of the Year, he said that Robinson was a gentleman and we couldn't have won without him. He wanted to play more, Walker, but they had Snyder coming up and they had Ferrillo, and and Rickey actually wanted him to manage St. Paul, but Walker wanted to play some more, so he traded him to Pittsburgh, and all he got, as you said, was Preacher O and Billy Cox. So I think Walker has gotten a very bad rap from history, and there are a couple of books out by his kids that are trying to straighten the story out. Because I think the importance of Rickey is not just his baseball knowledge and his genius, really, but the kind of person he was, and as you say, religious. And if people were bigoted, he wanted to talk them out of it. And I think we need that kind of attitude more today than ever before. And so that's why I always love a chance to talk about the many sides of Branch Rickey.
I don't disagree with you there. The one position he could never fill for the Dodgers, he could never fill left field. He had Sandy Ambrose, who made the great catch, and he had Andy Pafko, and he tried a million times to fill left field. He had the greatest center fielders and right fielders, but he couldn't fill left field.
That's true. That's true. They had Schuba for a little while.
Shotgun Schuba.
And Sandy Ambrose, who made that great catch that won their one World Series as a Brooklyn Dodger. But you're right, they did not have a regular left fielder.
Shotgun Schuba had the one World Series where he had a pretty significant hit in one World Series, but Schuba didn't quite cut the mustard.
Right, and then there was also Gene Hermansky too.
Oh yeah, well Gene Hermansky was a better player. Gene Hermansky almost hit 4 home runs in a game once. He hit the screen at Bedford Avenue the 4th time up. He had 3 home runs, but he was a pretty good left-handed hitter. He lasted quite a long time.
He just passed away within the last year, I think.
I
got to interview him. He had this great line about Rickey, about that Mr. Rickey had a heart of gold, and he kept it.
Well, that was
the other side of Rickey that I tried to get into the book, because he wasn't a saint, but is that he was very tough at contract time. Carl Erskine, who really loved him, said that when you went into him at contract time, and he'd say to you, "Well, you had a good year. We want you back."
Well, go ahead.
The story's just on and on.
The two interesting stories to me were that when John Quinn was general manager of the Philadelphia Phillies, and Richie Ashburn led the league in hitting, and Richie Ashburn came in to sign his contract, and John Quinn gave him a contract that was $500 less than he made the year before, and Quinn said, and Richie Ashburn said, "I led the league in hitting," and John Quinn said, "Yeah, but you hit all singles. There are little flies out the left center field." And Whitey said to him, "Well, if they were 10 feet further, they'd all been outs."
Oh yeah. Yeah, those are great stories from those days. But that's part of the reason. They had all the carts. But I'm glad you mentioned Quinn, because George Weiss, Mickey Mantle, wins the Triple Crown. The next year he still hits well over 300 with a lot of homers. They want to cut him because he didn't hit the Triple
Crown again.
But it's right opposite of what we have now.
Yeah, but it's nice to know that they're all on the same page for a change.
At last.
I think at last, So,
and the other thing that you probably touched on in your book too, if there was a fellow that looked the least of the part of being a great general manager or a great baseball man, it would be Branch Rickey. Nobody, if you saw him, you would never think that he knew anything about baseball, or for that matter, knew anything about anything.
Well, he wore bow ties. He actually commuted on weekends down from Chestertown, Maryland, where he had a farm down there. And, one of the great lines a sports writer ever said about Rickey, this was when he was in St. Louis in his heyday there, is that he had the face of a deacon, the manners of a diplomat, and could get in and out of your pockets without mussing a hair. And that's what makes him, such a great character. And one of his disciples, in a way, or at least a disciple of Ferocious, is Bobby Valentine, which is why a lot of people want to see him get that Red Sox job, because there'll be stories, 5 stories a day if he's up there.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. And I don't know your opinion, but I'll throw mine out. I just think that the Red Sox are in a position right now where they need a Bobby Valentine. I'm not a great Bobby Valentine supporter as a manager, but in the context of the Red Sox as they're formulated right now, I think Bobby Valentine may be the perfect fit.
He might be. I mean, I think they'll either be very good or there'll be more turmoil than they even had this year. And frankly, I'm an Oriole fan who does not like the Yankees, and the people, I used to live in Baltimore, and I call them the Warriors now, but they're still my team. And the way the Red Sox fans and the Yankee fans have taken over Camden Yards in the last 10 years has been terrible. I mean, it's been,
right.
I feel for the people of Baltimore. And it's the nouveau Red Sox fans that have become worse than the Yankee fans, because they think they're entitled to win. And those of us who love baseball know that it's about losing and dealing with losing and winning and trying to win every day, but being a little humble about it. And a lot of the Red Sox fans have not been like that. So I've sort of enjoying what they're going through. But if Buchholz comes back healthy and Lester continues to be a good young pitcher, I mean they'll have some horses, but.
Right.
This is the great thing, because to watch out for Toronto. I mean, Toronto's got a lot of money now, and most of all, they've got good scouting. They've doubled their scouts, and they really have good scouts, and they're becoming a national team. So I would keep my eye on Toronto, and I love what Tampa Bay has done as well too. And,
well, if you're an Oriole fan, maybe we'll get to meet you and see you down here in Sarasota, because that's where the Orioles. Although they're having a few arguments over money right now in Sarasota.
Yeah, to refurbish some of the fields.
Yeah, not necessarily Ed Smith Stadium, but some of the fields off-site. They want the city to pay a little more money for that. But the Orioles.
Well, I was there last year, and
Were you?
Nothing like. Oh man, it was great weather, and to give you an idea, as you know, I'm an old-time fan. My last day in Sarasota, I'm sitting in that left field pavilion
right.
that they just opened. And who am I sitting with? Strangers, right? The fellow turns out to be Ted Kluszewski's grandnephew.
Oh.
And so, I mean, I remember when Clue used to come into New York, the Cincinnati Reds, or Red Legs there for a while, and, we'd cut his sleeves off, and
right.
And Leo DeRocher was asked who's the strongest man in the National League, and he said Gil Hodges. And what about Kluszewski? He said, well, you said man. So,
oh, no.
And Sarah, they've done a nice job with Ed Smith. But unfortunately, I mean, the Orioles have some pieces, but their pitching, was totally overvalued last year, and
right.
they don't have close to a number 3 starter, let alone an ace. So I don't know what they're going to do.
Well, one thing in the American League East is they don't do anything else. I don't know what's going to happen now with Bobby Valentine, but if you look at that American League East, they've got right now at least 3 and probably 4 of the best managers in baseball in the American League East.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Madden is tremendous. I mean, what a great story Madden is,
Oh.
And, I mean, he's loved my Rickey book, so I've been very predisposed to like him. But, when you get to know him, he's such a natural. He's a real rarity, because he's very intelligent and is on top of all the statistics, but he's got this common touch. I mean, you probably
he went to Lafayette, so he's got to be smart. He went to Lafayette.
well, you heard the wonderful story about it. They gave him an honorary degree, even though he didn't graduate.
Right.
And he said, this was last year, not this year, the year before. And And he gets up there and says, I got my degree in the 37-year plan. So he's always got the quip, you know, but he's also got that thanksmith that where they're helping feed the needy. And I'm actually going to be speaking for some alumni groups at Columbia in the middle of next month, so I'm going to be able to help out in Tampa, and he's going to do it in Hazleton, his hometown. And I mean, you know, it's just wonderful to see people who get it, you know, who realize that most of us would dream of wearing a uniform every day and trying to win every day, and it's a blessing and a privilege, and to give something back from that. It's so wonderful when they get it, you know. I mean, and not too many do, but those who do get it should be hailed, you know.
Well, I'll tell you, Doug sent me a copy of your book. I didn't get a copy, but I will certainly either get it from Doug or I'll get it. I'm really looking forward to it because Branch Rickey was one of my all-time favorites. I can remember sitting at Evans Field in 1944 when they had a little before your time, I would imagine, but
no, I was born in '42, so I remember. But that was a year that they didn't win, and it was wartime.
Not only that, but they brought Tommy Brown right out of high school. If you remember, he came out of high school and played third base for the Dodgers in 1944, and even DeRocher played in those days. But Archie Vaughan played left field, and Goodman Rosen played center, and Dixie Walker played right, and I can remember that team like it was yesterday.
Well, yeah, then you probably remember they would roll the cigarettes. If he hit a home run, they would roll the cigarettes down. But when Tommy was so young, somebody grabbed the cigarettes before he could get them. And Jake Pitler, the coach, had them. They would go. He had them in the minor leagues, and he said they had candy bars and comic books more than shaving kits on those road trips. You know?
I think if
but that's what Rickey loved.
If I'm not mistaken, he was Eddie Stanky's father-in-law, wasn't he?
No, that was Milt Stock.
Oh, Milt Stock, right.
Stock.
Yeah, Milt Stock, the one that sent Cal Abrams home.
I have a great story in my book, Don, about there's a guy named Joe Olive from the Eastern Shore who got injured and never fulfilled his promise, but Branch Rickey actually signed him in a farmhouse in the Eastern Shore, and Olive is sitting in the dugout in spring training 1950, and Cal Abrams is on second base in an exhibition game.
Right.
And Branch Rickey tells this Joe Olive, he says, "Watch that man on second base, son. He's not one of our better base runners." And talk about, you know, 6 months later, you know. And I guess, did you talk to Ashburn about that play?
Oh, yeah.
Supposedly Ashburn was backing up a possible pickoff, and that's why he was playing so shallow.
Well, for two reasons. One, that's correct. He was coming in which he thought was going to be a pickoff, and also the fact that he'd been playing shallow from the outset because he always liked to go back on a ball, never liked to come in as much, and didn't have. Well, he had a stronger arm than most people thought because he was a catcher in the early days, and everybody thought that you know he couldn't throw that well. And I mean, he certainly wasn't any Carl Furillo or anything like that, but he was accurate. He got rid of the ball quickly, and Cal Abrams was out by a mile. And that was the end of Milt Stock. He never coached there.
Exactly.
He got fired that night.
Yeah. Well, you know, the Phillies, you know, I mean, Robin Roberts was the first person I met when I was interviewing for the first book on the labor history because, you know, he brought Marvin Miller into baseball. He and Bunning were the biggest advocates. Roberts told me a great story that I have in the book about Rickey spoke in a fellowship for Christian athletes group, and Rickey says, well, I just had a beer before I came here, and I'll tell you, you know, I don't usually use that, but I could see how you might want to have more than one. And that broke up the whole place because, you know, Rickey did not believe in alcohol, but you know, he had to. But one of the great lines I dug out from my book was from the sports writer Tom Meany, who you might have heard of.
Yeah.
And he said about Rickey was a dry in terms of alcohol, but he wasn't violent about it. And that's so essential to understand how bright and good a man
Lee, we're coming down kind of to the end of our time tonight. I want to give you a chance to tell the folks where they can get the book. You have a website, or?
Well, thanks so much, Doug. It's available. I have a website, lowenfish.com, and it's available from that website or directly from Amazon or from the University of Nebraska Press, who published the book, both the hardback and the paperback. And their website is universityofnebraskapress.com, or an 800 number, 1-800-755-1005.
90 seconds.
Great to talk to you about it.
Lee, it's been a while since we had you on, but thanks for being with us.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Really, really enjoyable, and I'll tell you, Branch Rickey is one of my all-time great. I think they got to make a movie of his life one of these days. I don't know who they get to play Branch Rickey, but
well, you know, it's interesting. It's interesting you mention that, because Robert Redford is supposed to be playing him in a film that's been long delayed. So I don't know if that's going to happen. They have not cast Jackie Robinson, so I don't know. The film about Rickey has to do the whole life, though, because you can't look at the Robinson thing without looking at what he did.
Now they can't do a Moneyball job there. They got to do the whole. They have to do the whole life story.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's been great talking with you, and I guess now it's maybe 74 days to spring training.
We'll look for you down here in Sarasota next spring.
Yep.
When you get down there, let us know when you get down there, will you please?
I will.
Yeah, send us an email, Lee, and we'll do another one when you come down. That'd be great.
Yeah, we'll catch you for dinner or something.
All right.
Great. Thank you, Lee.
So you'll be down yourself. Okay.
I leave here. I'm just up here for
10
Thanksgiving and
seconds.
Christmas with the family, and then I go back down on the 28th of December, and I'm there till May 5th. Beginning of May.
Great. All right.
Thank you, Lee.
Be in touch for sure.
We'll talk to you soon.
Good night now.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.